The military said it conducted a raid earlier this morning, killing Dia Zaba Musli al-Hardini. They also killed the leader's 2 adult sons, who are also affiliated with ISIS. In a post on X, the U.S. Central Command said, quote, "These ISIS individuals posed a threat to U.S. and coalition forces, as well as the new Syrian government. The military command promises to continue to relentlessly pursue ISIS terrorists wherever they are." And the United States is recalling the negotiation team working on talks to end the war in Gaza. A State Department spokesperson said yesterday that recent responses from Hamas show a lack of desire to reach a ceasefire. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also weighed in.
While the mediators have made a great effort, Hamas does not appear to be coordinated or acting in good faith. We will now consider alternative options to bring the hostages home and try to create a more stable environment for the people of Gaza.
If Hamas interprets our willingness to reach a deal as weakness, as an opportunity to dictate terms that would endanger the state of Israel, it is making a grave mistake.
Netanyahu also said Israel and U.S. are considering other options to bring the hostages home and end the rule of Hamas in the territory. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff said Hamas was to blame for the impasse. Netanyahu said Witkoff got it right and that Hamas was the obstacle to a deal. Secretary of State Marco Rubio criticized France's plan to recognize Palestine as a state. In a post on X, he called it a slap in the face to the victims of October 7th. Rubio condemned the move as reckless, saying it fuels Hamas propaganda and pushes peace further out of reach. French President Emmanuel Macron announced the decision yesterday, sparking swift backlash from Israeli leaders. Here's more.
With the move, France would become the first major Western country to recognize a Palestinian state, potentially fueling a movement so far dominated by smaller nations generally more critical of Israel. Israel maintains that recognizing a Palestinian state now would be equivalent to rewarding Hamas. Israeli officials have spent months lobbying Paris to prevent what some have called a nuclear bomb for bilateral ties. And news of Macron's decision on Thursday sparked anger in Israel, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying the move, quote, rewards terror and risks creating another Iranian proxy. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said it played into Hamas's hands and was a, quote, slap in the face to the victims of October 7th. Macron had been leading towards recognizing a Palestinian state for months as part of a bid to keep the idea of a two-state solution alive, despite pressure not to do so. Now the announcement comes ahead of a UN ministerial meeting on the subject next week. The timing is aimed to give the French team a framework to work with other countries that are also considering recognizing a Palestinian state or have misgivings over doing so.
Meanwhile, other European allies are weighing in on recognition of Palestine as a state. A British cabinet minister said the UK supports the eventual recognition of a Palestinian state, but he said the immediate priority should be to end the suffering in Gaza and ensure a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Earlier, British governments have stated they would recognize a Palestinian state at the right time. However, they never set a timetable or detailed the conditions needed for this to happen. Italy's foreign minister said the recognition of a Palestinian state must concur, or rather occur along with the recognition of Israel by the new entity. He said a Palestinian state that does not recognize Israel means the problem won't be resolved. A government spokesperson from Germany said today the country won't recognize a Palestinian state in the short term. He said the priority now is to make long overdue progress towards a two-state solution. Joining us now to discuss the latest on the Hamas-Israel ceasefire talks and the food situation in Gaza is David Wormser, Senior Analyst, Center for Security Policy, and former Senior Advisor to U.S. Vice President Cheney. Good afternoon, David. Always great to talk to you. To start off, the U.S. and Israel recalled their delegations from Gaza ceasefire talks. What does that mean? What is the signal?
Well, it could mean one of two things. I mean, the first is the more obvious, is they've given up. They don't think that Hamas is serious and that they're not going to sign a deal, and there's really no diplomatic track anymore to get it done. And that's verbally what we heard from the president. The second option is, and I think it's more unlikely, but it's still out there, is that this is the Israelis are signaling with the United States both playing real hardball. with Hamas and essentially saying, fine, if you don't want to make a deal, we can escalate. We can go, the United States and Israel can, or as President Trump said, Israel can go all the way. And maybe the threat of that, or the beginning of that, or the course of that, that could lead Hamas to finally realize that the game is up and they have to give up. It could mean one of those two things. I think though it's the former.
Okay, what are your thoughts on the chances? Which way are you leaning in terms of peace talks restarting again?
Yeah, I think that at this point Hamas has gone as far as it's going to go in terms of the diplomatic route. I think that they are going to try to string along the West, Israel, and the United States as much as they can, but they really can't, in their mind, go any further, partly because they answer to people from abroad who have a vested interest in keeping the conflict going, but second of all, because they really don't have any options left in terms of giving up and surviving. The Israelis and the United States have made it very clear that the end of this process is their removal from power, and they don't want to give up power. So I think that really leads to the point where Hamas has no more. It's the end of the road here, essentially, for them.
So then why not agree to a deal that benefits itself and it will be beneficial for other parties as well? Why doesn't Hamas just do that?
Well, I mean, objectively, they're at the end of the road, but they, by the declaration by the French, they feel that maybe they're winning the public affair campaign. So they're not playing for Gaza. They're playing for the larger issue of destroying Israel and destabilizing the West and embarrassing the U.S. government. So for them, they're quite encouraged by this constant focus on what's going on the ground in Gaza with, quote, starvation and so forth as well. So they're encouraged that on the larger question of their role in Palestinian society, and even more, their role in the radical Islamist camp, will be secured by giving up Gaza. So Gaza is only the means for them. It's not the ends.
So Steve Witkoff, the U.S. envoy, says, quote, we will now consider alternative options to bring the hostages home. What does that mean? What are the alternative options?
Well, there could be, again, three. First is the one that we've already mentioned, which is that the Israelis escalate and commence to taking over the remainder of Gaza, during which maybe Hamas, realizing that Israel's serious, might give in. The second thing is what obviously commandos. Israel's done that. It's freed some hostages. It's obviously very famous for having done that in Entebbe and other crises. It could mean that. The third way is simply if Israel occupies, some of the operatives who are holding these hostages may decide to save themselves. It's not an agreement with Hamas. It may be an agreement with local Palestinians that want to save themselves from the consequences of this and their neighborhoods, since the Israelis would go in. Or the fourth option, I said three, but there is a fourth, is that there are Palestinian tribes and families, mafias essentially too, that could intervene and save the day for both sides, and in the process establish themselves as the alternative to Hamas. So there are those options on the table.
So Israel's campaign, I mean, there's a lot of criticism against it. There's also a lot of support for it, right? What are the risks and rewards, benefits as well in Israel continuing a military campaign in Gaza?
Well, the risks both for not continuing and doing what they're doing now, sort of a slow grind versus a more escalated campaign. I think what you see, of course, is the risk, first of all, is the killing of the hostages. At any moment when Hamas feels that it might be losing, it wants to split Israeli society as well as simply hurt Israel. So they could kill the hostages. The second thing are the images that you see, starving kids and so forth. While one can go into why those images are even there, many of which are fake, by the way, but some might be real because there might be pockets of hunger. There's no vast starvation. And one can go into the cause. The cause is really that Hamas and the UN are sitting on top of vast deposits of food that the Israelis have left through. But because Hamas uses the food for money and for survival, and they insist on a distribution structure, they want to destroy the American-based distribution structure. And as a result, they're pretending, or they're deliberately enforcing a hunger. Whatever the issue is there, those images do not help Israel. They're a tremendous asset for Hamas and the Palestinian side in undermining Israeli support in Europe. And it's already led to the French declaration, or intention to declare a state, which then loops back and encourages them to keep going.
So you mentioned the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and I think it's important to reiterate, and maybe we could get your comments on, when we're talking about whether there's enough food for the people there, the situation, when we're looking at the relevant reports, those images that you mentioned, what should we consider, concerning the reliability of this information, especially given the fog of war, right? The risk of misinformation, that's there, maybe potentially also information coming from sources that might be compromised. So let's get your comments on that.
Well, indeed. I mean, almost anybody operating on the Hamas side, even hospitals and NGOs, are there because Hamas sees them as useful. Hamas has shown it really doesn't care that much about the Palestinians themselves. They hide behind them while they're in their tunnels, and the Palestinians are above ground in a war. So they actually are quite encouraged by the propaganda utility of having killed, dead Palestinians and hungry Palestinians. The second thing is they need the food structure in their control, because the food is donated for free. They resell it at a tremendous price. So that is the money that Hamas needs to pay its operatives, pay off tribes, and stay in power. And as a result, it can't give up the food distribution structure. But here come the Americans and the Israelis, and they've set up a secure food distribution structure that does get the food for free to the Palestinians and undercuts them. So they really have no choice here but to try to destroy that free food structure. And the way they're doing it is saying, oh, Israel is starving Gaza. All this food is not getting in. And the Americans may love their one or two little places of distribution, but there's not enough food in here. Look, all the Palestinians are starving. The only problem with that is we see the border and we see what Israel's let in and what the UN and Hamas have under their control. And right now, there's almost 1,000 trucks sitting under their control in Gaza, not being distributed.
Your thoughts on the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's handling of the situation?
Well, they've been quite professional. We've had, again, Hamas Health Ministry talks about 10, 20, 30 people being shot at their distribution centers. All these things turned out not to be true, as so much of what the Hamas Health Ministry does say. Whether it's the Al-Ahli hospital at the beginning of the war being bombed when it wasn't. And there's really been almost nobody killed by the American company, GHF, under Reverend Moore, or the Israelis who are providing protection for it. And it's been an effective structure. The Palestinians who show up are quite happy about it. They've distributed close to 50 million meals in the last month and a half to two. So it's working. And I would just go with it. Whether they're choosing the right Palestinian tribes or clans, or some would call them mafias, to work with, it's a little bit distasteful, but they are working with some, and one can criticize that, but it's working.
Well, all right, David, like I said in the beginning, it's always great to talk to you. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Coming up, deportation flights from a detention facility